Good morning. My name is Matthew Devine, and this is Leadership Impact. One of the topics that I wanted to cover during these sessions is neurodiversity. Some of my clients I've encountered are on the spectrum and they face different challenges in the workplace. And I wanted a chance to discuss what are those challenges? What does it look like? And what do leaders need to know if they have employees who are facing some kind of challenges because they're on the spectrum. And so I wanted to have a conversation with my colleague, Kristen Santos, who is experienced in this area. And I knew that she would be able to bring a lot to the discussion. So I've decided to set up a call with her to explore this topic. So welcome, Kristen, to the
Oh,
Leadership
thank
Impact.
you. Thank you for having me. And yes, I
Now,
have
could you,
lots I can talk about here.
now I'm not going to do your backgrounds the proper service, so I'm going to let you introduce yourself, and if you could
Sure.
explain why are you an expert and what brings you to this topic in this area?
Sure. So my name is Kristen Santos. I am the owner of the coaching business called Kristen Coached Me. I specialize primarily in working with people with ADHD, but I do work with all kinds of people, all kinds of minds. And I run group coaching and individual coaching programs. I also work in organizations. I came to this work specifically because I was a late in life diagnosed person with ADHD. And had I known that a source of a lot of my struggles came from there, and that things I had called weaknesses or had shame around were actually untapped strengths, then my life would have looked a little different. So I'm on a mission to help support people to be themselves and to learn about their brains and how to create a life that is friendly to their brain. So here I am.
Awesome.
Oh, and I'm also an occupational therapist, and I have a background in leadership and a degree in leadership. So that
And
also
you
is
saved
a
in the
filter through my
U.S.
work.
Coast Guard,
Oh, and
so
there's that, right? So classic ADHD presentation where I've done a million things.
well, thank you, and thank you for speaking with me today. I really appreciate
I love the
your
opportunity.
insight on this. So the first question up is, I know many of my leadership colleagues, managers I work with, they know the term neurodiversity, but they may not really know exactly what's all included, what it really means. So
Yeah.
I figured if we could start with just simply you giving us a foundation. What is neurodiversity?
Yeah. So I'm going to give you my off the cuff version, and I recommend you can also Google it to get a more in depth version. So my sort of off the cuff way of explaining this is that just as there is diversity in all of nature, this is a concept of looking at people with ADHD, bipolar disorder, anxiety disorder, major depression, autism, a specific learning disability, dyslexia, et cetera, as rather than deficits based or they have a problem or their brain is broken, it's more like, wait, they are part of this tapestry of diversity of brains. We all have different ways of processing. And so part of this sort of more inclusive environment is recognizing that and tapping into those strengths of people with these different brains or brains that process information differently. So and when I say
Yeah.
differently, by the way, I mean different than maybe our assumptions or what we see as typical, um, because I didn't think my brain was different. I felt I was broken, but I didn't think my brain was different. So there you go.
Well, and we all are living in our own brains.
That's
So,
right.
our experience of the world is very personal, and it's difficult
Yeah.
to really understand the difference. Like, I'll give you an example from my own life. I've got a family member who she can't imagine things in her head. So if you ask her
Yeah.
to picture a tree, for instance, she knows the definition of a tree. And if she looks out the window, she can say, "Oh, that's a tree."
Yeah.
But she can't bring up an image, like a picture in her
Yeah.
mind. And that's just how she works. And she's gone on, done school, university, she's got regular jobs, so she's completely functional, but she just can't picture things visually
Yeah.
in her mind. Whereas I am the opposite. I have a very vivid imagination when it comes to
Yeah.
picturing things in my, you know, inside. And that I pull that out as an example of
Yeah.
how just people can have different ways of processing information in their
Yeah.
own head. And that doesn't limit them in any kind of way. It's just a different way of looking
Yeah.
at things.
Yeah. It's not wrong.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's just different than me or you or whomever. Yeah.
Right. Right. Now, when it comes to the workplace environment, people who are on the spectrum, and especially if we look at people who are, maybe, have autism or, experience ADHD, they're going to have different challenges and different experiences in the workplace. Can you give us a sense of what that experience might look like? What are they feeling? What are they seeing? How are they engaging the work? How are they
Sure.
engaging with their colleagues?
So, I'll preface everything I say with as we've both talked about, every experience for each person is different. And if you really want to know, you can ask people. And there are some general themes that tend to happen amongst clusters of different types of brains. So, for the purpose of time, I'll just focus on autism and ADHD. And I do that because there are some ways where their strengths and are completely polar opposite. So, people with autism often can be quite literal. Sometimes they have difficulty filtering out a lot of sensory information. And so, a way to close a channel off can be to maybe not provide the eye contact. Um, they tend to be really detail oriented, sometimes really highly visual. So, I mean, that's another reason
Mm,
to want to kind of close off this, like, it's like having a speaker turned up to 11. Um, it's overwhelming. So, people with autism and with ADHD can be really creative. People with ADHD can be creative and can have an incredible sense of intuition. They may be able to just pick up on some of those social pieces in a hypersensitive way, and sometimes autistic people will miss them, and so that can
mm.
become an issue, for those folks. Oh, and this is just my own personal experience having worked with autistic people. There's this level of loyalty and honesty that's there. I mean, who wouldn't want to have an employee that is loyal and that is honest, you know? Um, so those tend to be strengths that I see. Along with that, creativity is for people with ADHD, there's also this real out of the box thinking. And I don't know. I would assume that a lot of organizations are looking for people, I guess depending on the industry, but are looking for people that are out of box thinkers who aren't who are going to think in a different way. Yeah.
Mm,
So
mhm.
those are some just general kind of well, I'll add two more. Can I add two more?
Mike is
Both of
yours. Go
us
for
and
it.
all of us. So I think I mentioned that I was late in life diagnosed with ADHD. Um like anybody, give me real clear, specific, timely feedback. Don't create, here's the autism, and don't create a lot of metaphor and symbolic language because my brain autistic brain works a lot more literally. Be
Mm,
specific when you explain things. Um, don't make assumptions. Sometimes a part of the brain for an autistic person that gets like the gist of it all, the overall sense of it all, they might need some support around that. Um,
that's really interesting because I know my own tendencies. I love metaphors and expressing things as
yeah,
in a conceptual sort of way. But what I'm hearing from you is that's fine, but it's if we're providing feedback to an employee who, you know, has challenges with that, that may not give
yeah,
them the information they need to
yeah,
adjust their work or their
absolutely.
behavior.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And from a personal experience, I'll tell you this isn't work. Um, I have an adult child that's autistic. I have two adult children that are autistic. And what I have learned is one of them, they're really good with feedback. Receiving feedback is amazing. And it's because they aren't taking things personally. They really actually like that I'm saying something either positive, supportive on noticing something that's working, but it has to be specific. And of course, it's authentic. And then also feedback around how to improve. Again, they crave that personal experience, and they really receive it well a lot of times. So
Can I
again,
ask
that's my
just
personal experience. Everybody's different.
can I ask just a little bit more of a technical detail on that? Because I'm
Yeah,
just
go ahead.
curious. So when it comes to providing, say, negative feedback, do
Yeah.
you preface those statements to say, I'm going to now give you some feedback on how to improve? Like, do you preface
Yeah,
the
yeah.
actual
Good
feedback just to
question.
cue
So,
them? What do you think?
yes, and I think it's good for all humans. I feel like this is what works to prime their nervous system from going into fight, flight, freeze, is to
Mm,
ask. Ask, can I give you some feedback? And then most people will say yes. And if they say no, honor that and revisit it again, because maybe they just aren't, they're in a space like a lot of us where they just aren't able to receive anything. Maybe they're feeling overwhelmed. But ask
mm,
first. Ask first. And it primes our nervous systems to be more receptive, all of us, whether we're neurodivergent or not, to be able to receive what our brains are going to perceive in our culture as something threatening. So,
hmm
yeah.
hmm And then the individual can have the option to say, yes, I'm open to feedback. They're now in a position to receive it.
Yeah.
And then the leader provides that specific, detailed, timely
Yep.
pieces of information and
Yeah.
actionable that they can do
Yeah.
something with.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Your employee will be, I think most employees want to hear that. And again, a lot of the things
Hmm
I'm going to say are just basic, I feel they're basic tenets of good leadership.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. Everything we're saying, if you're a leader, do these things.
Do
And
all of
if
these
you,
things,
if you,
neurodivergent or not.
and be very mindful if you have, it's somebody who is possibly autistic or whatever it is,
Yeah.
make sure that this is definitely the approach that you take.
Yeah. And I don't know if you're ready to move into, I'm thinking about assumptions right now.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so another big component as a leader to be thinking about is, again, any good leader, don't do this. Don't make assumptions. Don't
mm,
make assumptions. So don't specifically, I'll bring up eye contact, and I'm speaking for myself. So as a person with ADHD, especially in the Zoom artificial world, and for a lot of us, but even outside of Zoom, I have always been a person who didn't, especially on a day where I was having difficulty shifting my attention, I needed to look away because I needed, again, focus on this one channel of stimuli because I was going to lose that thought. So,
mm,
culturally, in our culture, in this Western culture, we may assume that if you're not giving me eye contact, we're taught what? You're not being honest, or you're not paying attention, or right? So or you're disinterested, when that's not at all true. In fact, that person with ADHD is actually really invested and really interested and has to look away because they are trying to focus on something really important.
this
And
is also, oh, sorry, go ahead. Keep going.
yeah, and for folks with autism, again, don't rely or think that it's good, it shows connection, or it shows you're paying attention, or you're invested, or you're being polite if you give me eye contact. And they may be looking away because, in a similar way, because it's too much stimuli for their brain to take in, because oftentimes that visual system of theirs is so hyper attuned. It's, again, like turning up the volume to 11. So don't assume when they're not looking at you that they're feeling shame or any of the fill in the blank, that they
Hmm
just process
hmm
information differently. And if you have a question, you know, ask. And ask, like, ask in a place that is, if you, I'm assuming that you've created safety in your culture where all people feel that it's appropriate to be able to ask for what they need, period,
hmm hmm
neurodivergent or not. So being able to have conversations about, can I support you? Do you need, and or I need, just being able to see people as they are and accept them as they are and not make assumptions.
hmm Yeah, I think this is really important. And also don't diagnose your employees. Don't
Oh,
as
yeah.
if you see behaviors, don't assume that there's a
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
Obviously,
Yeah.
work with all
And
your people, but don't assume
absolutely.
that. If
And you
they
don't have
if they
to,
come to you and share that information, okay, that's great.
right.
But don't
Right.
go in and say, I think you're ADHD.
Yeah,
Probably
absolutely. And
wrong.
the person may not, they may not be, and
Yeah.
or they may not realize they are, and it doesn't even matter because uh, when I talk to people and work with my clients around seeking accommodations, and that's a whole other topic, but they don't ever, and many people don't disclose. They don't ever have to disclose, at least not in the
Mhm.
U.S. Uh, but the things that often things the things that we're often asking for are things that any place would have, real simple opportunities to, and I don't know if we're kind of segueing into a different space here, but I'm thinking about ways that we can create an environment that is more friendly to all kinds of brains.
Mhm.
Is that
Mhm.
okay to kind of transition into that space, or are you
We can transition to that, and that the thing, creating a safe space is a much broader topic because
right?
certainly it covers people who are neurodivergent, but it's also cultural differences as well. People who may be from different places, different back upbringings and backgrounds. There's creating an environment where anyone coming into this space can feel like they belong and can contribute and are accepted.
Absolutely. And that's where it starts with right there. Again, going back to great culture, great work culture, and great leadership starts from these two big places of
Mhm.
creating an environment and a culture where, or maybe even the leader can model,
Yeah.
that casually, like saying modeling. I think I used to do this accidentally as a leader that didn't know she had ADHD at the time. I might say, oftentimes I will speak before anyone else speaks. And so I'm consciously stepping back, create space for other people here because I
Mm.
process information in this way. Because I knew I processed information in that way. So it was a way of kind of modeling my own vulnerabilities or
Mhm.
my own needs, right? And that it's okay, it kind of sends the message then, right? That it's okay to have needs that feel like they might be different from everyone else. And it's okay
I
to
think just
ask.
on that point as well, there's opportunity that the leader can invite people to say
Absolutely.
what they
Be
need.
explicit.
You don't have to wait
Absolutely.
for them to volunteer. Sometimes they may not feel comfortable, saying something because they themselves may not feel comfortable with it. But the leader creating the space to say, hey, what do you need? You know,
Yeah.
how do you
Yeah.
want us to, work together?
Yeah. Absolutely.
What other things can leaders do to help create both that safe space, but or also deal with employees who are facing these kinds of challenges in the workplace?
Yeah, so I would say that realizing the strengths too. So it's not just about challenges, it's also being able
Hmm.
to tap into their strengths. So, again, like any good leader, being able to know what your team members' strengths are and
Mm.
helping them to realize what those are if they don't already, and then to be able to, if it's possible, to put them in different assignments or positions where they are able to be used in their strengths. Again, going back to how that's what a good leader would do anyway, but in particular, um, again, speaking from my own experience, I was in a situation, I was in a work situation at one point in my career, again, didn't know I had ADHD, and it was a very kind of structured, predictable, rote kind of work.
Mhm.
And I brought lots of creativity to that because I would. And
Mhm.
what I didn't realize was that that culture didn't want that. They didn't say it, but I knew it. Eventually, I
Mm.
really knew it. So,
Mhm.
had I known that about myself, I would have maybe targeted organizations that would have been more comfortable with having people that would challenge a status quo and create something new and novel and innovative. Um,
Mhm.
and I don't know if I may have just gone off track though. You were asking about like how they might make it also more accessible, right?
Yeah, just the kinds
Yeah.
of things that
So
leaders can be thinking about when
yeah,
supporting
so some common
employees.
stuff that tends to happen is just being flexible on how the work gets done if you can be,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So for some people, remote work is a great idea. For some people, it's not so good, or a blend, or it looks different on each day, or but being flexible to how the work gets done is also really important. So maybe they need a quiet room. Maybe they don't need a quiet room. Sometimes people need to hear some background chatter so they can focus, and others need complete silence. I wear these earplugs sometimes when I'm struggling that are they're called loop earplugs. You can get
Okay.
them for pretty cheap anywhere. I actually learned it from another colleague with ADHD, and it can create some level of noise canceling. So they're very low
Interesting.
profile, and I can wear them anywhere. I can filter out different sounds in the environment and engage in like a busy meeting or a busy networking event and not have my nervous system get overwhelmed, where I
Yeah.
can't pay attention so well. Um,
I like that you mentioned the networking event because, work can be more than just simply being at your desk typing away at something,
yeah,
but being in a very active, sometimes chaotic social environment, having that to sort of muffle out some of the excess noise. I think that's a
yeah.
great suggestion.
And I don't know if this is possible. Thank you. And I don't know if this is possible in every work environment. It's actually not possible in every work environment. What I've learned as an entrepreneur with ADHD is when my dopamine is most accessible, dopamine helping me to be able to know what to attend to and do my best work, one of the,
Hmm.
neurotransmitters in the brain.
Hmm.
And so I can do intense, focused, amazing work in 4 hours. After that, brain doesn't work. you know
Mm.
so if you're focusing on the product, for me, man, am I going to be a great employee. If you're focusing on time in, time out, and that's it, then maybe that's also not a good setting for me. But you also, wouldn't be able to access my strengths so well. And there are ways of getting around that, though. So, and I can speak to that at a different time probably. But
Okay.
being aware, I think, for ourselves as leaders, especially if you're a neurodivergent leader, or just, I think we all notice in general, like whenever we can attend best and not, when we're able to do more focused work and when we're not, and just paying attention to that as with a leader and as a person with neurodivergence on how to work in your strengths.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So,
Okay. We're
yeah. So
Yeah, we're
go
sort
ahead.
of getting towards the end.
Yeah.
Wondering if there's any kind of resources that you might be able to recommend, or places, websites, or anything that people could look at.
Yeah, so I apologize that my resources are primarily US based. It doesn't mean that people
Sorry that
elsewhere
you're
can't.
American.
Yes, I'm sorry again. I apologize in advance. So where I send a lot of my clients, first off, I'm a firm believer that because there's so much disinformation out there and a lot of hooey, I and that in itself is just takes time sorting through. So two places in particular. One is called ADD.org.
Mhm. And we'll put
And
all this stuff in the
yeah,
description.
yeah,
So, but keep telling us.
yeah. And then the second one would be CHADD.org. And both of these are meant for people with ADHD and people in the lives of people with ADHD. You
Hmm.
can also go to, there are a few articles if you subscribe to Harvard Business Review on neurodiversity, both from the person with neurodiversity experience and the manager or leader, assuming the manager or leader doesn't have some level of neurodiversity. But
Hmm.
I didn't find a lot out there on that, but I can speak to that myself. So yeah, there's a couple of reputable resources I've found that people can
Great.
go to.
Thank you. And I think you mentioned when we were talking before, at the beginning of the call, that you actually have your own resource available. What is that?
Yes. Yeah. So I have this thing called a freebie that I offer.
Okay.
And it's based off of my biggest pain, which was, oh boy, like these are the mistakes that I made when I didn't know that I had ADHD and
Mm.
I was in leadership. And had I known, I would have managed ahead of time certain
Ah,
things. So yeah, I'm happy to share that. And of course, if
okay.
you have, any questions further, then go ahead and feel free to reach out to me. So
Terrific. So we'll include that link as well so people can get access to that.
sounds good.
Now, just to wrap up, are there any just sort of concluding thoughts that you have when it comes to things that leaders need to be mindful of, or employees need to be mindful of in the workplace?
Yeah. No, nothing really beyond that is quick. Just really, it's like, don't make assumptions, create a safe place, be vulnerable. All these are good leadership techniques, right? And
Hmm.
and it's also this strengths-based perspective that uh, just because I have ADHD or autism or whatever, or it's or I'm struggling whatever, or I'm not having my strengths tapped, realize that the diversity of all of our different both experiences and culture and backgrounds and brain types adds to the richness of our organization, our work environment.
Mhm.
So,
You know, the assumption piece made me reminded me that there's also the biases that sometimes people have around ableism,
oh,
and
that's
their
right.
sense of,
Yes.
like what is possible only fits within a certain box, and that's actually
Right.
not true at all.
Yeah. Yeah. And I had, when I realized I had ADHD, I went through my own sort of assessment and saw my own internalized limitations or ableism kind of that I had for myself. These sort of biases and assumptions that I had just absorbed through the culture that we're in Western culture. So that needed some sorting out. So I would say that's actually something I would add that's extra is again, a good leader first knows themselves. So realize yourself if you have any assumptions, biases, or myths that you carry around neurodiversity and put them in the light.
Mhm. Kristen, thank you very much for this conversation and helping us learn more about neurodiversity uh, and all of this topic, and helping us be better leaders
Yeah,
in the workplace.
it's my
Um,
pleasure. It's actually my mission. So glad to be
Great.
here.
We're in the right place.
We are.
So all the resources, we'll link them in the description so you can find them there. Likewise, if you want to carry on the conversation with Kristen, you can get her contact information there as well. And if you want to carry on the conversation about leadership and communication, you can reach out to me,
That's
after
great.
this call. So Kristen, thank you very much, and
You're welcome.
look forward to a future conversation. So, take
Okay.
care.
Bye bye.